Hello, beautiful beings. Welcome to Soul Shift Messages. If you found your way here, trust there's something in this message for you. Understand this space is about growth, truth, and transformation. We don't bypass here, we don't sugarcoat, and not every message will feel comfortable, but it will be honest. I speak in flow, and sometimes that includes cussing. It's just part of how the messages come through. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and trust your own discernment above all else. Take a deep breath, and let's get started. At this time, please know that I currently make content weekly in 3 parts. Part 1 focuses on what needs to be revealed. Part 2 focuses on what needs to be understood. Tends to be a deeper dive looking at the underlying mechanisms. And Part 3 focuses on what needs to be done. Essentially, what action do we need to take to embody whatever topic we happen to be discussing for that week. Based on when you see this video, you will either see all available links in the description box for this week's content below. If you don't see it yet, there should be a note of when to expect that content. And as the new ones become available, I am pretty diligent about going back in and updating those links. So if you don't see it yet, just know it's on its way. So I say all of that to say this is part 2 of this week's topic. And the topic is the abandonment wound. So I am calling this message, you can experience connection without fear. Now, if you are new here, when I do get messages of a certain breadth and depth, I will read them more than I will focusing on articulating them. It's just my compromise to get the full message out in as much of a timely manner as possible. So let's go ahead and dive in because I don't want this to be longer than it needs to. All right. The core nature of the abandonment wound. The wound is not simply being left. It is the belief that emotional vulnerability is unsafe. At the center of this emotional structure is a deep contradiction. You strongly desire closeness, intimacy, emotional honesty, tenderness, reassurance, trust, safety, mutual recognition, and deep emotional connection. At the same time, another part of you associates those exact things with danger, instability, shame, emotional overwhelm, disappointment, dependency, loss of control, or abandonment. The core internal belief appears to be, if I become too emotionally real, vulnerable, dependent, visible, expressive, needy, attached, or invested, I may be rejected, abandoned, overwhelmed, humiliated, betrayed, or emotionally unsafe. This created an entire emotional survival system built around minimizing the risk of emotional pain. The wound may not have formed from one dramatic abandonment event. More likely, it developed through repeated emotional inconsistencies, such as affection mixed with withdrawal, warmth mixed with unpredictability, closeness mixed with emotional absence, praise mixed with criticism, emotional need followed by emotional dismissal, intermittent connection instead of stable emotional safety, and emotional intimacy that could not be fully relied upon. This kind of environment teaches the nervous system love can disappear unexpectedly. As a result, connection becomes associated with uncertainty rather than safety. Repeat it again. Connection becomes associated with uncertainty rather than safety. Abandonment became connected to self-worth. Emotional loss became interpreted personally. At a very deep level, abandonment here does not simply feel like someone left. It unconsciously becomes something about me was not enough to make them stay consistently. This creates a tendency to personalize relational instability. The psyche may unconsciously ask, what did I do wrong? Why wasn't my love enough? Why do I feel replaceable? What is missing in me? Why do I have to work so hard to feel chosen? This means emotional withdrawal may activate not only grief, but shame and perceived inadequacy. They want me to emphasize the perceived inadequacy. Babies, there is nothing wrong with you. You have always been enough. For a lot of you, the people who should have given you the love that you wanted, the safety, I'm hearing the security that you wanted and you deserved, simply were not capable. I'm hearing they didn't even have the capacity for it in themselves. And that is part of the reason they want you to be gentle with yourself as you listen to this message, because this can hit a lot of deep things that we don't really want to look at. But they also want you to recognize this is your opportunity to put that heavy stuff down, because it was not yours to carry in the first place. And they don't want you to carry it anymore. I'm hearing be strong, be brave. Keep going. Okay. But yeah, they want you to know it's not you. And again, if this hits deep, to be gentle with yourself, you can pause this, you can walk away. Always trust your discernment, know what is best for you, and act accordingly. Okay? Being chosen can become emotionally linked to worthiness itself, and emotional distance can begin to feel like evidence of personal failure. Wow. For some of you, that's interesting. So for some of you, if someone is emotionally distant right now, I'm hearing that's actually a favor. That's the universe doing you a favor. That's leaving you room for reassessment. Someone could be giving you the silent treatment. You could be giving someone the silent treatment. That's a favor. Some of you need emotional distance from someone. This could be a group. Take it how it resonates. But yeah, that's your favor. And that's a personal favor. That's interesting. Let me say that again so that lands how it's supposed to be. But I knew that came out for a reason. I just had to sit with that for a minute. All right, being chosen can become emotionally linked to worthiness itself, and emotional distance can begin to feel like evidence of personal failure. This is why relational shifts may feel disproportionately painful. They activate both fear of loss and fear of not being enough. Conditional belonging and the fear of being too much. If you've been around here for a little bit, this has been being too much has been coming up more and more lately. Babies, if anyone tells you you're too much, that's just a sign of incompatibility. Like, that's really where I'm going to leave it. I've explained it more in past videos, but treat that as you're not aligned, you're not compatible, and use that information how you see fit, because we have our moments. Don't get me wrong. I have my moments where I'm a little over the top, and I usually know when I'm doing it. So if someone calls me out, like, I'll usually laugh it off and be like, yeah, you're right. But like, if someone just keeps telling you that you're constantly too much, that's not the right person for you. And I don't care what type of relationship that is. That could be work, friends, family. It could be a partner. I don't know. But I'm just saying, for the right people, you like, none of them should be telling you you're constantly too much. Like I said, we all have our moments. I like to do my big one too, but yeah, I'll leave it at that. Acceptance may have felt dependent on adaptation. There are strong signs that belonging may have felt conditional rather than unconditional. Part of the psyche appears to have learned I must manage myself correctly to stay loved. I must become what others need. I must suppress difficult emotions. I must remain emotionally manageable. I must stay useful, insightful, composed, strong, mature, or self-controlled. Or if I become inconvenient, emotional, needy, intense, or difficult, I may lose connection. This creates a relational identity built around monitoring how acceptable your emotional reality is to others. The fear becomes not only, will people leave me, but also, will I still be loved if I stop adapting myself to maintain connection? This can create emotional over-accommodation, shape-shifting in relationships, suppressing authentic needs, difficulty asking directly for reassurance, guilt around dependency, self-monitoring during emotional experiences, and uncertainty about where adaptation ends and authenticity begins. For that last part, some of you may recognize there are some people who genuinely lose themselves in relationships. Some of you may recognize you lose yourself in relationships, right? Because you just adapt to what the other person wants, or what you think they want, or what they need, or say they need. and things of that sort, that when the relationship ends, like, people are at a loss. And it's very devastating. Not that it isn't devastating when relationships end, but it's extra because you don't know where the adaptation ends and where you authentically began. So if that is coming to mind, they're saying yes. Yes, that is an accurate connection. At the center of this is a deeper shame. My natural emotional needs may be too much for others, and they're not for the right people. These are old beliefs. These are outdated beliefs. I am bringing them up so they can be examined and readjusted. This is not to internalize. Our goal is to bring this to our awareness so that we can work through this and get to healthier mindsets and see things for the reality that they actually are. That's our goal, babies. I'm here an eye on the prize. This is not the time to get discouraged. Hypervigilance and the expectation of loss. The nervous system learned to anticipate abandonment before it happens. A major feature of the wound is constant emotional monitoring. Part of you may unconsciously scan for changes in tone, emotional distance, shifts in attention, ambiguity, delayed responses, subtle signs of withdrawal, evidence of disinterest, and signs of replacement or rejection. This creates chronic hypervigilance. Love becomes something to monitor and manage rather than simply receive. Say it again. Love becomes something to monitor and manage rather than simply receive. The nervous system may expect loss even during moments of connection. I'm hearing even safety doesn't feel safe. My heart goes out to you if that resonates with you. This leads to anxiety inside intimacy, difficulty relaxing emotionally, over-interpretation of relational signals, fear during closeness, and emotional tension even when things are going well. The emotional system prepares for abandonment before it arrives. Distortion of perception during emotional activation. Fear can temporarily narrow interpretation of reality. When abandonment fear activates, perception itself may temporarily shift. Ambiguous situations can begin to feel emotionally absolute. For example, temporary distance feels permanent. Uncertainty feels like rejection. Inconsistency feels catastrophic. Silence feels emotionally dangerous. And emotional shifts feel loaded with meaning. This does not mean the perceptions are imaginary. It means the nervous system assigns heightened threat significance to relational ambiguity. The emotional body may react before conscious reasoning can stabilize interpretation. Your nervous system, your mind, your emotional body, it's just so hypervigilant. It is just immediately assigning meaning and running with it before you could ever intercept it. And that I'm hearing that is part of the reason why we have to address this wound, as hard and as ugly as it is. We just have to. Babies, I am just hearing this is just no way to live. The divine, our ancestors, our loved ones, I'm hearing pleading. They are pleading with us to put this down. They're saying they had to carry this, but we don't have to this time around. And it would be very healing, not just for you, but also for them, to put this down. Distrust of dependency. The psyche learned that needing people is dangerous. One of the deepest layers of the wound is not just fear of abandonment, but fear of emotional dependency itself. The psyche appears to have concluded the more I need someone, the more vulnerable I become to pain. As a result, survival strategies formed around self-protection and emotional self-containment. These strategies may include hyper-independence, emotional control, self-sufficiency, adaptability, perfectionism, emotional restraint, intellectualization, spiritual detachment, minimizing needs, avoiding vulnerability, and becoming strong for survival. Another internal belief may be, if I manage myself perfectly, I won't need anyone enough to be hurt by them. This creates a painful paradox of longing deeply for connection while fearing the emotional dependence that connection requires. And they said, don't get it twisted. That is the correct word. Requires. They want me to say it again. This creates a painful paradox of longing deeply for connection while fearing the emotional dependence that connection requires. I'm hearing you cannot have genuine, unconditional connection without emotional dependence. I'm just hearing that's not how it works. You have to both be fully present and have reciprocity for that, with that emotional dependence, to have genuine, unconditional connection. And my heart goes out to you if what I'm about to say next resonates, but I'm hearing some of you are starved. And that's the word they're using, starved, for genuine connection. Emotional parentification and premature maturity. You may have learned to emotionally care for yourself too early. There are signs of unusually developed self-awareness, emotional observation, self-management. Say it again. Makes sense. There are signs of unusually developed self-awareness, emotional observation, and self-management. This often develops when someone learns early to regulate themselves without reliable emotional support. Sorry, that one hit for me. So, when someone learns early to regulate themselves without reliable emotional support, to understand others before understanding themselves, to prioritize stability over spontaneous emotional expression, to become psychologically mature too quickly, and to carry emotional responsibility prematurely. This can create someone who appears insightful, emotionally intelligent, composed, resilient, perceptive, psychologically aware, and emotionally strong. But internally, there may also be exhaustion, loneliness, hidden emotional deprivation, difficulty receiving care, discomfort relying on others, and feeling emotionally older than one's environment. Part of the wound may therefore involve never fully feeling emotionally held while becoming highly skilled at holding yourself. Over responsibility for relationships. You may unconsciously feel responsible for preventing emotional rupture. Because the nervous system became highly attuned to instability, there may be a tendency to unconsciously assume responsibility for maintaining connection. This can create patterns like overanalyzing relational dynamics, trying to prevent emotional rupture, managing other people's emotional states, self-blame during disconnection, emotional overfunctioning, or trying to internally fix connection. Part of the psyche may believe if connection fails, I should have prevented it. This creates emotional burden and relational exhaustion. It also creates imbalance. You carry emotional responsibility that actually belongs to both people. You were never meant to carry all of this by yourself. You never were. And I'm hearing put it down. I'm hearing it's too heavy. Put it down. The splitting off of emotional needs. Parts of the emotional self were rejected in order to preserve attachment. There appears to be a split between the socially acceptable self and the instinctive emotional self. Certain emotions and needs were likely experienced as unacceptable, dangerous, embarrassing, excessive, shameful, and threatening to connection. The exiled emotional material may include grief, rage, emotional hunger, dependency, attachment panic, possessiveness, longing, vulnerability, fear, and unmet needs for reassurance and care. The psyche may have learned my natural emotional reactions are too much. As a result, direct emotional expression became difficult. Instead of openly saying, I need reassurance, I'm hurt, I'm afraid, I need closeness, or I don't feel emotionally safe, the emotional energy may instead get rerouted into overthinking, withdrawal, silence, emotional masking, perfectionism, intellectual analysis, self-containment, control, emotional suppression, performing competence, spiritualizing pain, or trying to transcend emotional needs. This is a crucial insight. The wound is not only about being abandoned by others, it also involves abandoning parts of yourself in order to maintain connection. This is self-abandonment. Let me grab some water. Shame at the center of the emotional experience. The wound contains deep shame around having normal human attachment needs. This pattern is not only built on fear and guilt. Shame appears central. Specifically, shame around emotional need, dependency, intensity, vulnerability, longing, reassurance seeking, emotional sensitivity, and fear of rejection. Natural attachment needs may have become internally associated with weakness, inadequacy, immaturity, emotional failure, loss of control, and burdening others. This creates self-observation during emotional moments, monitoring your reactions, judging your vulnerability, trying not to appear too emotional, and minimizing needs before others can reject them. As a result, emotional inhibition can continue even in safe environments. This is how you can self-sabotage blessings. I don't know who needs to hear that, but that's how you can do it. Emotional inhibition can continue even in safe relationships. For some of you, your mind is playing tricks on you. You are not seeing your reality for what it really is. And I'm going to be really honest here. Don't come for me. I am the messenger. I work here. Some of you do have safe relationships in your life, and you don't feel safe in them. Some of you absolutely have unsafe relationships in your life, and you don't feel safe in them. That's actually, I'm hearing that's the danger of this wound, is that you just don't feel unsafe, even in the ones where you should feel safe. Some of you feel very confused. You feel like you can't trust your own signals. You're not entirely wrong. Also, if you know you have unsafe relationships that you should leave and you're like, why can't I just leave it? It's this. It's this shit. This wound runs very deep. Very, very deep. And I'm hearing if what I just said resonated with you, part 3 is for you. Someone's got ancestors who do not fuck around, and I like them. They said, get your ass on that. Watch part 3. I'm hearing, get the fuck out of this. All right. Someone's got some zesty ancestors. I'm hearing something about cracking beers. That's got to be for someone. Someone's got an ancestor here that's talking about cracking beers. I don't know. I work here. All right. Emotional invisibility and the longing to be fully seen. Important parts of your emotional reality may not have been mirrored consistently. There are signs that your deeper emotional experience may not have been fully recognized or safely received early on. People may have seen your intelligence, usefulness, adaptability, insight, and functioning, but not necessarily your vulnerability, fear, emotional hunger, loneliness, grief, need for comfort, or emotional reality underneath the performance. This creates a deep longing. Will someone finally see the parts of me that had to stay hidden? The wound may therefore involve not only wanting love, but wanting emotional recognition and accurate emotional witnessing. Not just attachment, but being deeply understood. Babies, there is nothing wrong with wanting someone to see you for who you truly, accurately, authentically are, and having them love you. No one is perfect. No one is perfect. I tend to joke we're only perfect in our imperfections, right? We're all doing the best we can with what we've got. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a natural, I would consider that a natural, healthy need. They also want me to remind you that in order to receive that, you need to open yourself up. How is the person who's going to love you for exactly who you are going to see you, witness you, love you, hold you, if you're not willing to show them who you are? Babies, no one gets through this life unscathed. You know, some of us have physical scars from things, and I would argue a lot of our battle wounds are truly unseen. I think one of the bravest, most honest things you can do in this life is go through these trials and tribulations and still decide at the end of the day that you are lovable, you are worthy of love, and all you do is just get more discerning about who is really worthy and deserving, and proves that they've earned the right to see that aspect of you. This isn't about hardening and adding more armor and closing off your heart and all of that. No, that's a lot of that is what they want you to do here. And I think it's just a beautiful thing to see someone be like, you know what, I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to put this shit down, and I'm just going to keep putting myself out there and letting the layers of things that are not actually me continue to fall away, and see who comes my way. And when someone who is worthy of that does come my way, over time, just show them the beautiful being you really truly are. All right, That's my soapbox for the day. Intellectualization as emotional protection. Understanding became a way to create safety. A strong survival adaptation appears to be intellectual and psychological insight. You may have developed heightened abilities around analyzing dynamics, recognizing emotional patterns, reading people, psychological understanding, self-awareness, conceptual thinking, systems thinking, or spiritual or philosophical interpretation. This likely became a strategy for emotional survival. If I can understand everything, I can prevent emotional pain. This can create constant analysis of relationships, emotional overprocessing, difficulty staying fully embodied in feelings, reliance on understanding instead of emotional experience, and trying to mentally control uncertainty. One of the deepest messages here is insight and healing are not the same thing. Say it again. Insight and healing are not the same thing. You may already understand the wound. From an intellectual standpoint, you may understand the wound while still carrying it emotionally and physically in the nervous system. That's why you need part 3. Whoever resonated with that, that's why you need part 3. Because it's going to give you what you need to handle it in totality and start unwinding the whole thing. We're going to the root. That's not the first time I've gotten this message. This is the root. The abandonment wound is the root. Thank you. The nervous system itself may still expect inconsistency, emotional instability, rejection, withdrawal, disappointment, and abandonment. This means healthy intimacy can still activate fear, even when conscious understanding is present. Say it again and louder. Okay. For the people in the back. Got it. This means healthy intimacy can still activate fear, even when conscious understanding is present. You have to tackle this wound holistically. You got to tackle all of it. I'm hearing we're going to hit the nervous system directly in part 3. How I'm going to do that yet, I don't know, because I haven't pulled it yet. But that's what they're telling me. We're going to hit the nervous system directly. Whether you want to go that far or not is up to you, but that's where I'm going. The conflict between control and emotional surrender. One part of the psyche longs to open while another immediately tries to regain control. There appears to be a deep internal conflict between wanting emotional freedom and needing emotional control to feel safe. One part of you wants openness, spontaneity, intimacy, emotional immersion, surrender to connection, and authentic emotional experience. Another part immediately responds with caution, analysis, emotional brakes. And that's like brakes on a car, emotional brakes, emotional slowdown. Self-monitoring, distancing, withdrawal, containment, and attempts to regain control. This can create repeating cycles of emotional opening, fear activation, over-analysis, emotional withdrawal or self-protection, longing returning and reopening again. Is just a constant cycle that you never get out of. I'm hearing that's what we're breaking in part 3. We're hitting the nervous system. We are going to interrupt this loop. That's solid. This becomes emotionally exhausting because closeness repeatedly activates both desire and fear simultaneously. Fear of abandonment and fear of engulfment existing together. The psyche may fear both emotional distance and emotional overexposure. The wound does not only fear being left, it may also fear losing autonomy, losing emotional boundaries, becoming emotionally consumed, losing self-definition inside intimacy, and emotional engulfment. This often develops when closeness once felt overwhelming, intrusive, emotionally consuming, unpredictable, tied to obligation, and emotionally unsafe. As a result, two opposite fears can exist simultaneously. Fear of abandonment and fear of emotional engulfment. This creates internal push-pull dynamics, craving closeness, then needing distance, wanting reassurance, then fearing dependency, longing deeply, then feeling trapped. This can create confusion because neither isolation nor full vulnerability feels completely safe. Maybe some of you have heard me talk about balancing polarities or polar harmonics in previous videos. That's part of what this is, right? So let's take one of these push-pull dynamics, right? So hang on, let me put this notebook down. So you got craving closeness over here, and then you got needing distance over here. These are two poles, right? These are opposites of each other, all right? And basically what happens is if you swing too hard one way, you've now suppressed the other, and to try to balance it back out, you got to swing it back the other way. That's how you get these push-pull dynamics. So when I talk about balancing polarities, it literally is that. You have to bring it to neutral in this center space to balance these two streams out. It doesn't mean you always have to stay there, but you have to develop the capability to hit this center point and be able to balance these two extremes. This is the ability to hold complexity and hold more than one thing being true simultaneously. This, for some of you, if you've been thinking about self-mastery, this shit right here is self-mastery, right? Because when you balance that shit in the middle, you can choose where to be in between these two poles. at any given point, because you can always go back to being neutral, right? So if you are craving closeness, you no longer need to be all the way right here, because to me, this is like fucking enmeshment. Like, you don't know where they end and you begin energetically, But you also don't want to do this either, because this is complete isolation. And that's not healthy either. But you can move into craving closeness and getting closeness and then coming back to center. That's still healthy, right? You're not swinging back and forth constantly between the two. You can go back to the center and balance it out. This is part of how we also get to energetic and emotional sovereignty, right? Because if you can balance it out, you can choose where you want to be and when at any given point. That's going to help someone if that's confusing to you. Babies, just leave it. They wanted me to make that connection for someone. All right, let's hop back in it. All right, anticipatory distancing and emotional self-protection. All right, hold up. Let me go back to that. Those push-pull dynamics between those extremes, that is also tied to the internal gridlock, the splitting of the self, where I also talked about how you overextend on one side and you suppress the other, and it forces the other side to swing in to try to help balance it back out. Yes. So if that came to mind as well, yes. The abandonment wound is tied to, they just want me to be very clear, because I actually made this connection not too long ago. The abandonment wound is tied to the series I did on fully embodying your sexuality, imposter syndrome. What else did I do? I keep forgetting my own topics. But pretty much anything I did from the fully embodying your sexuality up until now. So like the internal gridlock, the energetic enmeshment with others, like all that stuff. It's all got ties into the abandonment wound. So if I'm reading this and you're listening to this and you're making connections to previous videos, even the series I did on overextension is tied to this too. Yeah. So let's just keep going. Okay, again, anticipatory distancing and emotional self-protection. The psyche may leave emotionally before others can leave first. Another major pattern is preemptive emotional withdrawal. Instead of waiting to see whether abandonment occurs, part of the psyche may unconsciously detach early, suppress emotional investment, lower expectations, numb feelings, retreat inward, become emotionally cautious, create emotional distance, question connection prematurely, or emotionally disengage before vulnerability deepens. Externally, this may appear as independence, selectiveness, calmness, needing space, emotional restraint, high standards, self-control, stoicism, or detachment. But internally, the mechanism is often, I must emotionally protect myself before loss happens. This is self-protection against anticipated pain. They want me to emphasize, though, it's anticipated pain. Some of you are doing this, and it's not even necessary. You're preparing for pain that isn't even coming in that moment. All right. Intermittent love and the conditioning of uncertainty. Love may have been present, but not stable enough to create trust. Say it again. Love may have been present, but not stable enough to create trust. The wound may not be rooted in complete emotional deprivation. Instead, there are signs that love existed, tenderness existed, emotional beauty existed, and connection existed strongly enough to create longing. But the emotional safety was inconsistent. This distinction matters enormously. Abandonment can come in multiple forms, in different ways in people's experiences. So, babies, discernment. Take this if it resonates, leave it if it doesn't. All right. My heart goes out to you if you actually were physically abandoned. All right. Because that does happen to some of us in this experience. And my heart really goes out to you. But I'm hearing for some of us, that was not the case. Some of us were emotionally and relationally abandoned. Intermittent emotional nourishment often creates fixation, attachment anxiety, emotional dependency mixed with distrust, idealization, emotional confusion, heightened sensitivity to relational shifts, and difficulty relaxing into connection. The nervous system becomes conditioned to associate love with uncertainty. That's why we need to hit the nervous system directly in part 3. The nervous system becomes conditioned to associate love with uncertainty. Idealization, emotional amplification, and disillusionment. Relationships may become emotionally symbolic very quickly. Because longing runs deep, emotionally meaningful connection may become psychologically amplified. People or relationships may initially become idealized, emotionally charged, deeply symbolic, infused with hope, connected to imaginary futures, or experienced as emotionally significant very quickly. But once vulnerability deepens, fear structures activate. Doubt, suspicion, emotional scanning, disappointment sensitivity, fear of betrayal, withdrawal, emotional collapse, and defensive distancing. This can create oscillation between emotional elevation and emotional deflation. Again, those are two poles. That's that push-pull, that oscillation. We gotta balance that shit out. Part of the pain may not only come from losing relationships, but from losing emotionally imagined futures attached to them. Again, some of you see potential in people that they are not capable of achieving. And I don't know who needs to hear this, but they are being very clear. I need to say this. No amount of love, time, or energy you pump into these people are going to get them to where they need to be to fulfill your imagined future with them. I don't know why I had to go to that length for someone, but someone needed to hear that. All right. Confusing intensity with intimacy. Emotional activation may unconsciously feel like love. One of the deepest and most subtle patterns here is the association between love and emotional intensity. For some of you, if you're wondering why you're having such a hard time leaving something unhealthy, listen very closely. I don't know why, but I just heard this is for you, buddy. And I got that in another video. So whoever that was for, this is also for you. When attachment has been inconsistent, the nervous system may become accustomed to longing, uncertainty, pursuit, emotional highs and lows, unpredictability, and emotional activation. As a result, unstable or emotionally volatile dynamics may feel deeply meaningful or magnetic, while calm, emotionally available, stable connection may initially feel unfamiliar, emotionally flat, or insufficiently alive. The nervous system may unconsciously mistake familiarity for emotional truth. This can create attraction to emotionally unavailable or inconsistent people because they recreate familiar emotional conditions. Meanwhile, emotionally healthy relationships may initially feel quieter, less stimulating, harder to emotionally interpret, and unfamiliar to the nervous system. Part of the healing involves learning safety is not the absence of passion. It is the absence of chronic fear. This is why we have to hit the nervous system in part 3. Safety is not the absence of passion. It is the absence of chronic fear. The association between safety and self-containment. Emotional autonomy may feel safer than vulnerability. Another subtle layer is that the nervous system may associate safety with emotional self-containment, meaning not needing too much, not revealing too much, not depending too much, not exposing too much. Vulnerability, maintaining internal control, and preserving emotional autonomy. It's like your nervous system is basically saying don't need too much, don't reveal too much, don't depend on others too much, and don't expose your vulnerability, maintaining internal control, and preserve your emotional autonomy. That's crazy. This is crazy. How do you get genuine connection with unconditional love under these circumstances? You don't. This is not an environment for that. This creates another internal conflict. Closeness is deeply desired, but too much closeness can feel psychologically unsafe. So even healthy intimacy may activate subtle nervous system alarm because self-containment historically equaled protection. This means healing may initially feel unsafe before it feels freeing. Some of you are gonna have to push through the discomfort before you start feeling better with this. They're showing me the Nike symbol. Just do it. That's the message. Just do it. Again, that's up to each individual. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just here to deliver the messages and lay out the framework. How far you want to take it is up to you. Suppressed anger and buried grief. Anger may have become internalized rather than expressed directly. There are strong signs of restrained emotional anger beneath the sadness. This does not necessarily look like outward rage. Instead, the anger may have been redirected into self-criticism, emotional shutdown, resentment, numbness, passive withdrawal, cynicism, emotional superiority, defensiveness, collapse, and silent disappointment. This often develops when anger was unsafe to express early in life. Underneath the sadness may be a legitimate recognition that important emotional needs were unmet. Emotional safety was inconsistent. Parts of the self were not fully welcomed, and vulnerability was not safely held. The grief and anger are intertwined. Unprocessed anger can keep abandonment wounds frozen because the psyche never fully acknowledges what was actually lost or emotionally denied. Emotional fatigue and the longing for rest. The psyche appears exhausted from constant self-protection. There are signs of prolonged internal effort, not just pain, effort. Effort spent monitoring, adapting, self-regulating, analyzing, containing reactions, preparing for disappointment, protecting vulnerability, managing attachment fear, staying emotionally controlled, and attempting to maintain safety internally. This creates invisible emotional exhaustion. There may also be grief around how much life force went into survival, how long vigilance has existed, how much spontaneity was sacrificed, how much authenticity was postponed, how much softness was delayed, and how much connection was filtered through fear. Part of the psyche appears deeply tired of carrying emotional self-protection alone. The longing is not simply, I want love. It's also, I want connection to finally feel safe enough that I can stop bracing for loss. There is a longing for nervous system rest, emotional consistency, predictability, trust, safety, relief from vigilance, and permission to soften. The survival identity and fear of letting it go. Healing may feel threatening because the defenses became part of identity. The survival system became highly developed. As a result, parts of identity may now be built around being self-sufficient, insightful, emotionally controlled, psychologically aware, adaptable, resilient, independent, composed, or difficult to hurt. There may also be exhaustion around constantly performing, strength, maturity, understanding, composure, emotional management, usefulness, and self-sufficiency. A deep longing underneath this may be, can I still be loved when I am fully human? Not composed, not optimized, not emotionally managed, just real. Healing may therefore feel destabilizing because it asks for the softening of structures that once created safety. Heard the key phrasing is that once created safety. It is not keeping you safe anymore. For some of you, it is choking genuine connection. Part of the fear may become, if I stop protecting myself this way, who am I? This means healing is not only emotional, it is also identity related. The difference between survival and healing. The survival system is intelligent, but no longer fully necessary. The emotional defenses described here were not failures. They were intelligent adaptations to emotional environments that felt uncertain or unsafe. The psyche developed strategies to preserve connection while minimizing vulnerability. These strategies likely helped you survive emotionally, but survival and healing are not the same thing. The healing path here is not about becoming invulnerable, eliminating emotional needs, transcending attachment, never needing reassurance, avoiding dependency completely and perfectly, managing emotional risk. Healing instead requires allowing emotional reality instead of managing it away, expressing needs more directly, tolerating uncertainty without over-controlling, reconnecting with instinctive emotional truth, grieving unmet attachment needs honestly, integrating anger rather than suppressing it, allowing closeness without immediately preparing for loss, learning that vulnerability does not automatically lead to abandonment, learning that authentic emotional visibility can coexist with safety, and allowing yourself to receive care instead of only managing yourself. Most importantly, the emotional parts that were rejected internally are not wrong. The frightened part, grieving part, needy part, angry part, dependent part, vulnerable part, and the longing part are not signs of weakness or failure. They are deeply human attachment responses shaped by environments where emotional safety felt uncertain. The central healing realization. The deepest pattern was self-abandonment in order to preserve connection. The core survival strategy appears to have been disconnecting from authentic emotional experience in order to avoid losing attachment. In other words, parts of yourself were sacrificed to maintain emotional survival. At the center of the wound is a profound relational paradox. There is a deep desire to be understood, emotionally recognized, fully seen, deeply known, emotionally chosen without performance, loved without needing to constantly adapt, and emotionally safe enough to stop earning love. But simultaneously, there is fear that full visibility could lead to rejection, shame, overwhelm, betrayal, abandonment, emotional exposure, loss of control, dependency, and disappointment. So the psyche often attempts partial visibility, revealing some layers while protecting others, seeking intimacy while maintaining escape routes, staying emotionally understandable without becoming fully exposed, and translating emotional truth into safer forms before expressing it. The deepest longing may actually be to discover that authentic emotional existence does not threaten connection. That love can survive truth. That vulnerability does not automatically create abandonment. That emotional needs do not make someone unworthy of being chosen. That being emotionally human does not make someone difficult to love. The deepest healing now requires the opposite of the original survival strategy. No longer abandoning yourself in order to avoid abandonment from others. At the center of all of this is still a relational self that genuinely wants joy, openness, trust, emotional vitality, mutual recognition, tenderness, reciprocity, intimacy, emotionally safe love, authentic connection, emotional rest, and to finally experience connection without fear organizing the experience. That part of you is still alive. The fear structures are old survival architecture, intelligent, understandable, protective, deeply conditioned. But they are not the entirety of who you are. Some of you fear that you may have lost who you authentically are. That is not the case. I'm hearing all of you is still there. It is just buried underneath these layers. And part 3 is going to give you the structure you need to start pulling these layers off of you. So that is the message. Say that again to confirm it.